So today I'm going to be making a beach landscape scene, I think, out of buttons and fabric. I've got this piece of old jean material that was, I think, a piece out of my dad's work pants. So it's got these little pieces of glue here. And then I used it to test my sewing machine when I was having some trouble with that. So now it's got some of this bright blue thread all tangled up nicely. And I love reusing bits of fabric and working them into art. I've chosen this piece. It is a little slanted at the top, so I think I might cut it straight there. I don't like using rulers when I'm slow stitching because it kind of takes away from the fun of it for me. So I'm just going to estimate here. And that's straighter, but now we've got this funny little bump up here. Great. So this has been sitting in my fabric scrap stash for quite a while. So I'm just going to give it a little iron. Speaking of little iron, I have this tiny little mini iron that I found at a thrift shop that I absolutely love. It packs up totally flat. It used to have a sprayer here, but the sprayer's gone, you know. Okay, so here's the start of it. I think because it already has these lines here, it kind of suggests to me beach and sky. And I want to put a little house on it too. So I grabbed some fabric that sort of fit for me. I think I'm going to use this one to start with. And I could go, you know, more kind of, this is going to be sand beach. So it could be like more sand or more greenery, but I think this beach should have some greenery on it. I'm just going to cut it there. And I like the idea of seeing a little bit of the blue as a frame around the outside. So I'm going to snip the edges a bit. This was my absolute favorite pillowcase ever, and I think this might be the last piece left from it. It's been around for years. Okay, great. So I grabbed 3 different yarns because I wasn't quite sure what I'd want to use. This is a gray cotton. It's just a really nice, pretty heavyweight. This one is this turquoise 100% linen. So you can see it's quite a bit rougher, and I kind of like the look of it. It adds some nice texture. And then this is just plain old white sewing thread. Nice for sewing on buttons, and also the white kind of matches with the white from the jean, so I figured it worked. And where I live, the ocean is almost always gray, so I'm going to start with gray. The beautiful thing about slow stitching is you can really do anything you want when it comes to stitches. You could use a running stitch, you could do something much more artistic, you can do some beautiful embroidery. It's kind of just whatever you feel like in the moment. It's part of what makes it so, I don't know, almost meditative, really. I feel like a whip stitch is going to be the thing. I'm just going to come up the back, leave a bit of a tail. And there's going to be a lot of those at the back at the end, and I will deal with them later. And then, oh, you can't really see that, go in just underneath it and come back up. So that's going to be a little bit hard to see here. I kind of started on the wrong side. So I think I'm going to just go around for a while. And then when I get up to the top where you can see it better, I'll cut back. Okay, I've made it about halfway of the way around. I really like how it's looking. And I'll just show you what I've been doing to get to this point. So the thread comes out here. I'm going in along the side there. Going at a pretty steep angle and coming out, whoop, next to the other one there. And I had to change my thread and pull it tight, and it comes out looking like that with it coming out that side. Back in, Out again. And you could certainly work with less thread at once. I just don't like changing my thread really frequently, and I find that this heavier weight stuff gets used up pretty fast anyway, and it doesn't tangle easily. When I get to the corners, you can of course do your corners any way you like. I'm kind of overlapping them. So going in similarly right next to it, but then coming up the same hole. There's one stitch, and this gives me the opportunity to do sort of a square or mitered corner. And turn sides. And now I'll go back to my normal. Probably don't need the pin anymore. There you go. And so now the corner's sort of caught in there. You could do a few more and just, because that will probably fray over time, but I don't know. Fraying is a thing with this piece. When you get close to the end, I'm right before this next stitch. I want it to look like a continuous loop all the way around. So I'm going to go down the same way I would. It's hard to see, I know. And then come back up as though I were doing the next stitch, but right in that same hole that the other one came out of. Just like that. And then I'm going to follow that stitch that does exist over and just bring the thread to the back. It's slightly thicker, but you're not going to notice that. Bringing it over to the back. Look at that. It looks like little waves already. I'm going to knot the thread by just looping it through a stitch and then bringing it through that same loop and doing it again. Okay, now I have to decide what's going next. I wanted to use lots of buttons in this piece, so I could start, I think I'm going to do a sun up here later. Put some yellow ones up there. This is just a random collection of buttons I grabbed from my case. Collected from various clothes and thrift store. Sometimes they have those button bowls. So I guess the question is, do I want this to look more like, ooh, that's kind of neat. More like sand, more like grass. I don't really have a lot of green buttons going on here, so we might have to say no to the grass. But the pale yellow, I don't know if I really want to do a ton of buttons on this side. I also kind of thought this reminded me of a beach. I don't know why. Maybe I'll do like a little rock island over here, because this is going to be ocean. So I could do that. And of course for yours, you know, put buttons on, don't put buttons on, put beads on, charms. There's just so many options. There's nothing, like there's no wrong options. You can literally do anything with slow stitching. I'm just gonna sew on a few random buttons here. If you don't know how to sew a button, check before you start to make sure that the needle will actually go through the holes in the button, because that can be an issue. Yep, so I'm good with that one. But if I were to try it with something like this, so it gets stuck on the eye. So that's going to be really frustrating for you. So I'm going to use the smaller one, just kind of place it roughly where I want it. And again, I'm not that committed to exactly where it goes, so I'm not measuring or anything. And then around the back, I'm gonna hold it with my hand, come up through one of these holes, and that can be easier said than done when you're first sewing on buttons, so be patient, it'll be fine. Same thing as before, I'm going to leave a little bit of thread behind it. And with these 4-hole buttons, you can either go across it like that or up and down. And it gives you a couple different kinds of looks. I'm going to go up and down. So now I want to come up the other side. So you want to go enough times until it feels pretty secure. That's not going to come off. It's not wiggling or spinning. You can't like move it over. And get ready to sew the next button on. Now this one has really big eyes. And I almost think the blue would be cool. Maybe not look as much like sand anymore. It could be a tidal pool. Whoop, let's go with that. Okay, I like that. It's looking neat. Another one on the other side. Another 2. No, 2 is too many. Let's do this one here. There's my beach. I like my beach. This was a summer tank top that I loved and wore all over the place. Traveling. Don't tell anybody, but this was a piece of underwear. I mean, it is a piece of old underwear. And then here's some Sherpa lining from a shacket I had. Actually, I still have it, but I needed to take some of the lining out. I think it'll make really nice clouds. So there's that. And then I have some more turquoisey blue from this ocean themed tank top I had for a while. See, it even had some starfish remnants on it, which probably you won't be able to tell when this thing's finished, but I'll know. And then this was a button-up shirt, again, wore for a few summers. Because the ocean sometimes has waves, I'm thinking about tearing them into strips, or cutting them into strips, and then maybe stitching across them in kind of a loopy wave pattern. I'm just going to arrange some of this fabric and decide where I want it. Okay, so I decided I liked a more haphazard look for the sky. So I ended up capitalizing on the straight edge triangle pieces and added a few more, and I think I like what we have. Now I have to decide how to stitch it down. I think I'm going to go with the gray again because it just sort of suits this particular sky. I find when you're threading a big eye needle like this, I find it easier to make a loop instead of trying to shove the end through, because some of these yarns are twisted loosely together, and if you try and shove it through, it kind of just frays and splits, and you can end up with one side on either end of the eye, and now I have a split yarn that's even harder to get through. So instead, I make a bite or loop in the yarn and kind of pinch it together. And then just shove that through. It comes through a lot cleaner. Okay, I think I'm just going to do a running stitch starting on this side, going that way, and then work back and forth. Okay, ocean. Now, the piece with the starfish absolutely has to be in there. And I know it's a seam, which some people may not like. And if you don't, if you've got a seam and you don't like it, feel free to take it out. I think I'm just going to use it, see how it comes. I do want a straight, flat horizon kind of feel to my ocean. So I'm going to use that top edge there. This tank top used to have cute little polka dotted sandals on it. And I think beach umbrellas too. I honestly didn't wear it that often because it was a bit loud for my tastes. Okay, some of this gingham check fabric. I kind of like that. Gives it a bit of a wavy looking edge. One of my favorite things about doing art like this is you can just play around with it and see what you like, what you don't like. If something doesn't come out the way you wanted it to, you can just not use those pieces and use them in something else later. Now I have to decide how buttony do I want to go with this piece. Because there could literally be buttons everywhere. I kind of like just those buttons down at the bottom, but then it's gonna need some, a feature. I remember that house I was gonna put on somewhere. If I could turn that into a little cottage on the beach. I found this brown one, which I think is just plastic, but it has this crescent moon shape to it. So I think we're gonna turn this whole scene into a night scene because I just love this button and just needs to happen. I love this tassel. Totally gonna leave that. Later on I might add some darker yarn to it just to make it more wintry and nighttime. And I think the whole piece could probably use a border. Something like that, just to clean up the edges. But I might want to do sort of a crochet border on it as well. So I think I'm gonna let it sit for now. Think about it for a while and come back to it later. So there it is for now. Our slow stitched button piece. And I am pretty new at this whole YouTube thing. So if you did like this piece and you want to see some more, then feel free to subscribe.